Hello. So I thought I'd do another video on mindfulness of breathing, and I think what I'll do is I'll just start from the very beginning again and just set up the practice for you. I think it does really help with any form of meditation that we're living life in a reasonably ethical way. You don't have to be all prim and proper, you don't have to be a holy Joe, you just have to live your life with respect for other people and yourself, and to endeavour to be as harmless as you can. So keeping the 5 Buddhist precepts is a very good way of ensuring that the mind will be as calm as possible. And in addition, choosing to live a life of service to others. It doesn't have to be, again, you don't have to head off out to Africa and devote your whole life to helping others, but just being there for someone, making someone a cup of tea, listening to their troubles, little acts of kindness here and there will help to ensure that you have a very positive and healthy self-image, which means when you sit down to meditate there's less reason for recrimination. What we want is a lovely calm mind, so anything that you can do to help that process is beneficial. Also, keeping a nice, clean, tidy environment. Again, it's relative, it's not an absolute, but say before a meditation, if there's a particular place where you do your meditation, which again is a good idea, even if it's just a corner of a room, it's just to tidy up the room a little bit. Put books away, back on shelves, tidy up magazines and newspapers, putting the cushions back on the sofa, whatever it happens to be, you just spend a little time ordering your external environment in that way. It will actually help. It is helping to order you internally. So then before you begin a meditation, you might put on some incense or light a candle. If you've got a Buddha Rupa, that can be helpful just to create an ambience of calm. And it also helps just to reflect on what it is that you're going to be doing before you do it. So good idea to set a timer so that you don't have to think about time, how far through the meditation you actually are. Set a timer, then you can dismiss all thoughts of time, turning off mobile phones, that sort of thing, so you're less likely to be disturbed in that way. So you are creating an atmosphere around meditation. You're not just sort of just deciding, I'll do a bit of meditation and then just closing your eyes. You're setting it up, you're treating it as something valuable and as something important, and that really does help. So then before you start, it's just reviewing what meditation is and how to do it, and bearing in mind things that perhaps you've already begun to learn about what happens when you practice mindfulness of breathing. And so when it comes to the practice itself, following on from what I was talking about in the last video, the primary object of contemplation is the breathing, but it's not the only object. So it has to be a very much an inclusive practice, so that you include things like other members of the household making noises in other rooms. You include that in the practice. Thoughts about work, financial worries, whatever it is, that you include all those thoughts as being important. And I'll try to explain a little bit more why I think that's the case. But the main object of contemplation will be the rise and fall of the breathing process. At the House of Inner Tranquillity, we observe the rise and fall of all the motions, the pressure changes, the sensations connected with what's the word I do apologise, I seem to have gone blank. connected with the abdomen, so all the subtle movements, pressure changes of the muscles of the abdomen, including perhaps the diaphragm. If you get calm enough, you begin to detect this very small, slight movement. So it's all connected to the breathing process, but you're not actually aware of air. You are actually aware of tactile sensations, of movements. And the idea is that we just use that as our main focus. And the idea is that you allow the breath to arise, remembering that we're already mindful naturally. You don't have to create this state of mindfulness. You merely have to begin the process. So just as at any moment you could just note colours quite happily. There's white, there's black, there's brown, whatever. That's essentially being mindful of and mindfully investigating what's actually going on in your experience. So you don't have to do something special to make the breathing meditation happen. The breath is happening, obviously. We're just connecting with those subtle sensations in the abdomen and just observing those movements. And so we perceive the breath in different ways. Some perceive it as an in and out motion, others perceive it as an up and down, or even as a figure of 8 motion. In my meditations at the moment, I'm perceiving it as like a contraction and an expansion, like a set of bellows, something like that. And the idea is you just rest the mind, watching, mindfully observing the in-breath and the out-breath. And so it's about deliberately setting up with the in-breath, and there's enough mindfulness to observe how the breath falls also. And then you deliberately look as the in-breath arises, but you're resting and you're allowing the breath to arise, all those sensations to arise, and as it were come towards you, rather than thinking, I've got to control the breath, I've got to be on top of the breath, I have to force the mind on the breath. That's just not necessary. And if you're struggling to detect where those sensations are, just place your attention in the area that you'd expect the breath to occur and wait. Now, in doing that, I appreciate, of course, that the mind instantly becomes interested in other things. There isn't the level of mindfulness and concentration. There isn't the level of volition and intention behind all this to just naturally keep the attention in one place to the exclusion of everything else. So the mind will go to and fro, it will go this way, it will go that way. And this is why it's so critical to be inclusive in the practice, so that we're including these movements of mind to other objects, whether they're external or internal. We're treating it as an integral part of what we're doing. And so I think it really, really helps to bear in mind that the Buddhist teaching is a wisdom training. Yes, it is about getting calm, but the calmness is the absence of passionate resistance. So calmness isn't something that through all your efforts you finally attain, like climbing a mountain. Rather, it's that you develop the wisdom into all the areas in which you passionately resist life and go out of alignment with the natural flow of life, and you see how that causes you to suffer, and so you learn through experience to drop those particular mental preoccupations, and what's left is a calm abiding. And then, because you're in a calm abiding and the mind isn't fractious, isn't passionate, it's then possible to focus more exclusively on the breathing process, because there's no opposition to that. So it's getting things round in the right order. It's you have to develop enough wisdom in order to just remain in your natural state, which is calm. And then if you follow the Vipassana path, then you use that calm state to develop deeper wisdom into transience, unsatisfactoriness and non-self. But at the stage of just practicing mindfulness of breathing, you need to be inclusive. You need to accept when you discover that thoughts have taken you away from the main object for a little while. You learn how to acknowledge and accept the existence of those thought processes and then bring the mind back. And so wisdom, the development of wisdom, requires there to be this contrast between the light and the dark, the calm and the passionate resistance. So if you can bear that in mind, if you can set the practice up in that way, where you understand what the main focus is, but that you're accepting of disturbances to that, and you allow for those and include them, and you develop your mindful noting of those other states, then you'll find that over time you're able to let go of those more easily and keep coming back to the breathing process. Now, so if you understand that, then the next stage is, okay, well, given that, granted that, is there anything that I can do to help anchor the mind on the breathing for a little bit longer? Because if you can do that, you develop your mindfulness on the breathing process, you start developing focus, and as your mindfulness and your focus develop, you develop this state of mind which can properly, what we call, suppress hindrances. So it's like putting a carpet of mindfulness and focus over the weeds of the mind, and so those weeds tend not to grow. And that's a delightful stage to get to. But firstly, it has to come from a position of acceptance. You can't just from day one just go, right, I'm not going to let any thoughts come up, because that's, sorry for that facial expression, I just caught that. You didn't deserve to see that. Nobody deserved to see that. Anyway, I think that's called gurning. Anyway, so you can't do that. It doesn't work. That's not going to lead to calm. You can't suppress thoughts. It's not going to lead to calm. So what you do is your attitude is that you're fully accepting of this process of contrast, and you're not fighting it. You're allowing for it. But then at the times when you are on the breathing process, yes, there are things that you can do, and I think that, from my experience, the key is in generating interest and fascination with the breath itself. So in the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha's discourse on mindfulness of breathing, he talks about when you're breathing in a long breath, you know that you're breathing in a long breath. When you know that you're breathing out a long breath, you know you're breathing out a long breath. When you're breathing in a short breath, you know you're breathing in a short breath. When you're breathing out a short breath, you know you're breathing out a short breath. And what I think that's saying, from, again, as I say, from my experience, what I think that's saying is that you can estimate the breaths. You can estimate the length of the breath, or you can estimate how hard or soft the breath is, or how smooth or ragged the breath is, or how deep or how shallow the breath is. And it's a very useful way of connecting the mind to that process and keeping it there, because you just breathe normally. I mean, you start to recognise, say, that you're very much aware of the breath here, say, or perhaps you are becoming a lot more aware that it's a deeper breath and it seems to be moving the muscles in the stomach area, in the abdomen, and you can just make assessments. And is it smooth? Is it ragged? Is it long? Is it short? Is it hard or soft? Is it fast or is it slow? And as you go through the meditation, you can then make a quick comparison compared with when you started. Is it fast or slow? Is it soft or hard? Is it deep or shallow? And it's just estimating the breaths in that way is just a way of taking just that little bit extra interest. Because really, it's not force which is going to get you calm, it's interest. It's not force that's going to keep you on naturally and happily observing the breathing process. It's the pleasurable interest and the fascination which arises with it. So it doesn't matter if that gets broken. It doesn't matter if you go, oh, that's an in-breath, oh, that's interesting. And you can actually just see little parts of the process and observe all these little ebbs and flows and changes in the breathing process, and it's all helping to just build a fascination and an interest. And at any point the mind then goes off and starts thinking about blah de blah, that's fine too. It really doesn't matter, because that's part of the process. So then you've got the contrast from being mindful and focused. You then have the contrast with the mind running off the leash. The little puppy is running off the leash and it's going for a pee somewhere, and then you catch up with it, go, come on, come back now, and you bring it back. That's a weird analogy, but it'll have to do. So that's estimating the breaths as a way of just helping to anchor with interest. Also commonly used are counting techniques. So an in-breath, an out-breath, counting 1, the next in-breath, the next out-breath, counting 2, the next in-breath, the next out-breath, counting 3. You can count to 5 and begin at 1 again. You can count from 1 to 10 and begin at 1 again. What I often do, if the mind is quite thinky, and as I said in the last video, I do have a very thinky mind, is I will actually choose to count in 5s. I don't know where I found this, but for some reason because I think what happens if you count from 1 to 5 is that it's like you get a bit bored of that, or it gets a bit too familiar and the mind just drifts off anyway. Same with 1 to 10. Getting to 10 is quite an achievement. It really is. Well done if you can get from 1 to 10. Brilliant. I mean, without interruption. But I found that counting in 5s, so in-breath, so being really aware of the in-breath coming up, and as it's passing away again, I'll go 5. And as the in-breath comes towards me, and then as it falls again, I'll go 10, 15, 20, 25. Is there something about just doing it? I don't know what that is. Maybe one of you can tell me why that seems to work really well. But it does. And then you start at 5 again and go up to 25. And that seems to help keep the mind there for a little bit longer. But always remember, you're not doing it to... The suppression of what in Buddhism we call the suppression of the hindrances is a harmonious, it's coming from a place of acceptance, not a place of rejection. If you're coming from a place of rejection of the thoughts, you're just going to get really cramped. If you try to focus on the breath so you don't have to have any thoughts, you're just going to get so cramped. You'll start getting pains actually in the abdominal area, you'll get pains in the shoulders, you'll get pains in the head, there'll be a sense of tightness, because what you're actually doing is the hindrance of torpor. You need to be really soft and open and allowing. You have to have a big mind. Even though what we're looking to do is ultimately to focus and reduce the area of our mindfulness to a very small space, you have to have an attitude of a big mind, an openness of mind. And then as you generate space in the meditation through observing the arising of the hindrances and allowing them to fall again, you start to get longer gaps where you are able to just to focus on the mindfulness of the breathing exclusively. Then you'll find that quite naturally and quite. This is another aspect perhaps I could talk about here. It's just patience. So there are factors of mind. They're called the 5 jhana factors. I can't remember if I touched on this in the last episode, but there are 5 factors of mind: initial application of mind, sustained application of mind, pleasurable interest, happiness, and one-pointedness of mind. Now they when they start forming in the mind, and through observing the mindfulness of breathing, doing the counting technique, or doing the estimation of breaths, but there's a significant time when you're not distracted by anything else, you're not caught up with anything else, then those 5, what we call jhana factors, will start to emerge really quite naturally. I got a letter from somebody today who was talking about being sitting in the meditation practice, and they started to become aware that their hands appeared to be melding together, and that their whole body was becoming sort of heavy and still, and there was this sense of otherness about it, and that's what happens. You start to get, that says that those jhana factors are beginning to arise and come together, and that happens quite naturally and spontaneously through observing the breathing process. So you don't have to force, it's not a forced suppression. Those factors of mind will naturally arise. And then of course we become elated, that's another issue. And you're just going to have to face that one, as we all have. And what happens is the mind starts chatting to itself because it looks like the mind is finally getting properly calm, and all those jhana factors are beginning to meld together and really suppress those hindrances. And we anticipate that happening and going deeper into that, and that causes us to become elated, which of course elation and calm don't go together at all, so we lose that calm instantly. And it's a rite of passage, and that you have to go through that process of gaining it, losing it, gaining it, losing it, in the end realizing that the elation is not helping you at all, and so you abandon that for a more equanimous, even-minded approach, and then those states of calm can really begin to emerge. So yes, just to review then, setting up meditation, taking time to straighten out your outward life in terms of keeping precepts and being of help to others, even to the point of tidying up the room that you're going to meditate in, just to help set things up properly. And then when we do go into the meditation, taking the time just to remind ourselves how to do it, what the technique is, and then recognizing too that you're going to lose the technique again and again, and you're going to regain it again and again. You know what your main object of contemplation is, the breathing process, and you're totally accepting of the fact that the mind will go off on its journeys. Accept that. We help the process of mindfulness of breathing by estimating the breaths and by counting. And we are patient and accept the fact that during the course of the full period of meditation, there's the opportunity, as we put hindrances down and keep bringing the mind back, keep observing the breath, take a real interest in the breath, that gradually those factors of mind that lead to the real suppression of hindrances will gradually emerge. And it's not a question of it's got to happen today or it's got to happen tomorrow. We're all very individual in our own particular characteristics, and so for some people it's something that comes very quickly, and for other people it takes longer. I've been doing samatha meditation since 2006. I find it extremely difficult, and I've just maintained that practice and gradually had to learn all these lessons in wisdom in order to be able to reach a point where I can keep the mind steady for a protracted period of time. So Yeah, you're not alone if you do find it difficult. But it's so worthwhile because you learn so much about how your mind works through doing that. So it's a really beneficial practice. And the outcome is, whether it takes you a lesser or greater length of time in order to develop this, is you eventually you do go into deep states of calm, not just every now and then, but if you persist with it, you establish it as the mind knows the route. It becomes second nature, and it knows exactly what to do and what not to do in order to go into a really deep state of calm and concentration. And so we're getting to the point then of talking about mastery of this process, and the ability to be able to remain calm, especially with what's going on in the world at the moment, to be able to abide in a calm, peaceful place is, wow, it's just your best friend, it really is. So I hope that helped. Until next time.